Hey guys, it's Coach Abel. I got a couple of emails today, so I wanted to go ahead and touch on a couple of things, show you a couple of the problems that several people had questions about. And again, if you're lost, make sure you email me. But before that, I wanted to introduce you to Liam. He obviously cannot say hi just yet because he just got a full belly of milk, so he's ready to go sleep. But figured you guys would want to see him before. So I'm going to hand him to my wife, and then we can get busy on doing some problems. Ooh. Burp rights clean. All right, so several people said, I have no idea what I'm doing. I have no idea what is happening. I don't know how to do any of these problems. The only thing I can figure is you didn't watch the video or didn't watch the video more than once. One student in particular that emailed me said, well, I asked all my friends in class and they don't know how to do it either. So hopefully we can figure out how to do this. Most of these problems that are on this worksheet are really pretty straightforward. I'll go through numbers 1 through 6 pretty quickly and do similar types of problems. Like number 1, I'm going to go ahead and we'll just do x squared minus 6 equals 10. Okay, and number 1 is x squared minus 2 equals 7, so this is a very similar type problem. It's very straightforward. Okay, now there are 3 ways that I showed you how to graph this on Monday. I'll go back and show you this. For the first 2 methods, to solve by graphing and to solve by factoring, we have to get this equation equal to 0. We want 0 over here on this side and everything else over on the other side, okay? And the way we always move things is by doing the inverse operation. I have a positive 10 over here, so to move it to this other side, I simply subtract 10, just like we've been doing since Algebra 1, since pre-algebra. So I subtract 10 from both sides, and I have x squared minus 16 equals 0. Okay, pretty straightforward. We get the equation equal to 0 when we are graphing and when we are factoring. Write that down in your notes. This is for graphing and factoring. We get the entire equation on one side of the equation, or we get the entire numbers, variables, everything on one side of the equation, and then we get 0 on the other side of the equation. Okay? Now, all you have to do to solve this by graphing is get your calculator out and enter x squared minus 16 in the y1 of your graphing calculator. Hit y equals, type in x squared minus 16, graph. Okay? And then it will graph it for you. And all you have to do is second trace, just like we did with the parent functions when we were finding the zeros for like 3 months. And the 2 zeros are where it crosses the x-axis. So you find the 2 places where the graph crosses the x-axis. That's your 2 answers. Okay, really pretty simple. Okay, to solve this by factoring. Okay, same process, we get it equal to 0, and then we factor this term over here. Okay, so we factor x squared minus 16. So we're looking for, with my x box, or if you just want to do the box if the x confuses you, I have x squared in the top left and negative 16 in the bottom right. Okay, and I'm just looking for these 2 boxes right here. I'm looking for the 2 numbers that multiply together to give me negative 16 and add together to give me 0, because I don't have a middle term here. I don't have an x term here. It's also known as the linear term in algebra. So since I don't have it, then that's 0. So what 2 numbers multiply to give me negative 16, add together to give me 0? That is obviously negative 4 and 4, because 4 times negative 4 is negative 16. 4 minus 4 is 0. Okay, so that means I have 4x and negative 4x. So then I have x times x gives me negative x squared, and it gives me x squared, and then it's minus 4 and plus 4 for my box. So my 2 terms are x minus 4 times x plus 4. Now, again, I got it equal to 0, so I have to leave the equals 0 part there. Okay, so then I just set each of these terms equal to 0. So I do x minus 4 equals 0, x plus 4 equals 0. Okay, then I just add 4 to both sides on this one to get x equals 4. And I subtract 4 on both sides of this one to get x equals -4. So if you had graphed this, hopefully you went ahead and graphed this one or will graph this one, you'll notice the graph will look something like this, where it's down here at -16 and then it comes up like this. And the two places that this graph is going to cross the x-axis is going to be -4 and +4, which are the two solutions that I get down here when I'm factoring. I'm always going to get the same solutions over and over and over again with these problems because it's the same problem. Okay, x squared minus 6 equals 10. Okay, and that works. If I plug it in, 4 squared. 4 squared is 16. What's 16 minus 6? It's 10. So that's the solution that makes this equation true. 4, also -4. -4 times -4 is +16. 16 minus 6 is 10. Okay, so 4 and -4 are the two solutions. Now, to solve this using the square root method, it's a little bit different. To solve it using the square root, I go back to the way I solved equations from the very beginning of this year. Okay, when I have x plus 4 equals 10, what do? I get the x by itself. Okay, so that's all I'm doing with the square root method. So same problem, x squared minus 6 equals 10. Okay, the difference when I'm using the square root method, which is what you're going to do for 3, 4, 5, and 6 as well, is instead of getting the equation set equal to 0 by moving everything over to this side of the equation, I want to get this x by itself. So I'm going to move everything that's not an x over to this side of the equation. So when I'm solving by a square root, I want to get the x terms by themselves. Well, there's only one x term here, it's x squared, so I'm just going to move the -6 over here with the 10. So to do that, I just add 6 to both sides. And I get x squared equals 16. Okay, now I don't care what x squared is. Okay, I got it by itself, but now I got to know what x is. So to determine what x is, I have to take the square root, because the square root is what undoes, or is the inverse operation of a square. Okay, so if I take the square root of x squared, that leaves me with x. But if I do it to one side, I have to do it to both sides. Okay, so I take the square root of 16. But also remember, I told you this on Monday, anytime I take the square root of both sides with this number, I have to take into consideration both the positive and the negative value. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and write the plus or minus in front of the square root so that I don't forget it. Now we all know square root of 16 is 4, so x equals plus or minus 4. Okay, so that also gives me the same solutions. Remember, whenever I did it by factoring, I did the x box and I got x plus 4 and x minus 4, x plus 4, x minus 4. Still gives me the same two solutions. Okay, so anytime I'm doing any of these problems, now 3, 4, 5, and 6, they simply have 2-step or 3-step quadratic equations. Okay, so I'm going to do one, let's say we've got, well, I'll just do number 3 for you. It's pretty straightforward. I have 4x squared equals 24. Okay? Now, again, my objective is to get the x by itself. So I have to move this, wrong hand. I have to move this 4 to the other side. What is the 4 doing to the x squared? It's multiplying. The inverse of multiplying is division. So I'm going to divide both sides by 4. 4 divided by 4 is 1, so that cancels each other out. 24 divided by 4 is 6, so I have x squared equals 6. Now again, I don't care what x squared equals. I want to know what x is. So to determine that, I do the square root of both sides. But again, remember, whenever I take the square root of both sides, I have to take into consideration both the positive and the negative values. So I do the plus or minus right here in front of the square root. Now, I can't simplify the square root of 6. There are no perfect squares that divide into 6. 4 is the smallest perfect square that I can simplify. And it doesn't divide into 6 at all. So this ends up being my answer. The square root of x squared is x. And then the square root of 6 is just plus or minus the square root of 6. I'll leave it alone. If I can't simplify it, that's as simplified as it gets. So the answer to number 3 on your homework is x equals plus or minus the square root of 6. It's all you can do with it. Okay, so don't overthink this stuff. Okay, simplify the radicals that you can. If you can't simplify them, leave them alone. That's the answer. Okay, let's do another one. What happens if I have one like number 4? I'll do negative x squared over 4 plus, we'll do 8 equals 0. So negative x squared over 4 plus 8 equals 0. Okay, now again, my objective here is to get the x squared by itself. So the first thing that I've got to do is move the 8. Okay, so to move the 8, I simply subtract 8 from both sides. So those cancel out, and I have negative x squared over 4 equals negative 8. Now what do I do? Well, I've got a 4 here, and more specifically, I have a negative 4 here, because I want to get rid of the negative 2. So if this is dividing by a negative 4, how do I get rid of it? I simply multiply both sides by negative 4. That cancels out the negative in the 4. But if I do it to one side, I have to do it to both sides. Okay, so then I'm left with x squared equals 32. Do I care what x squared is? Of course not. I want to know what x is, so I take the square root of that side. That gives me x. But if I do it to one side, I have to do it to both sides. But anytime I have a number, I have to take into consideration the positive and the negative values. So I do the positive and negative square root of 32. Okay, so I have plus or minus the square root of 32. Now, this I can simplify. Sometimes I don't know for sure, but it's a fairly big number. And actually, I immediately see, oh, well, that's 16 times 2. So how do I simplify it? Well, 32 is the square root of 2 times the square root of 16. What's the square root of 2? It's just the square root of 2. I can't simplify that. But square root of 16 is 4. So x ends up equaling plus or minus 4 times the square root of 2. So the full answer for this problem, negative x squared over 4 plus 8 equals 0. Okay? Pretty straightforward. That's how you do those square root problems. You get the x squared by itself by using the algebraic process, adding when it's subtracting, subtracting when it's adding, multiplying when it's dividing, doing the inverse operations until you get x squared equals a number. Once you do that, you take the square root of both sides, put the plus or minus on the number side, simplify the radical. That's your answer. So that's how you do 3, 4, 5, and 6, and also the C part of numbers 1 and 2. Number 7 and 8 are simply word problems. A squirrel in a tree drops an acorn. How long does it take for the acorn to fall 20 feet? So all you're doing on that one, and we'll talk about that more when I get home. Don't worry about 7 and 8 just yet. I'll do another video tomorrow for 7 and 8. Numbers 9 and 10, you're just setting it up because it's area. You're multiplying the length times the width. Well, they say the length is 3x and the width is x. So my area is 3x squared. But then numbers 9 and 10, they're giving you a number that the area is equal to. So 3x squared equals that number, and then you just divide both sides by 3 and then take the square root of both sides and simplify the radical, and that's going to be your answer for numbers 9 and 10. Again, numbers 11, 12, and 13, you're just squaring it. And the thing that you need to remember with that, it should be in your notes somewhere, but I'll write it again. remember, I is I, which is the square root of negative 1. I squared is negative 1. I cubed is negative I. And then I to the fourth is positive 1. So on all of these, you're just simply squaring everything. So I'll do one like number 12. If I have I times the square root of 7, let's say. Okay? They want me to find the square of that, which just means I'm squaring the whole thing. Well, I just showed you I squared is, so this is I squared times the square root of 7 squared. Well, I just showed you I squared is negative 1 times square root of 7 squared. What does a square do a square root? It simply undoes the square root. So 7. 7 times negative 1 is negative 7. Again, guys, don't overcomplicate these things. When it asks you to find the square, you just square everything and then simplify it. I squared is always going to be negative 1. So if you have an I and you're finding the square of it, that I just turns into negative 1 when you square it. Okay? And then whatever else you have in there, you simply square that number. If I had 4i and they asked me to find the square of that, well, then I do 4 squared times I squared. Well, 4 squared is 16. I squared is negative 1. So the answer would be negative 16. Okay? That's all there is to it. Don't overcomplicate it. Numbers 17, 18, 19, and 20 are just like what I've shown you. You get x squared by itself on one side, get the number by itself on the other, take the square root of both sides. Now, the difference is number 17, 18, 19, and 20 are going to have imaginary solutions, which just means you're going to have x squared equals a negative number. It's the same process as 3, 4, 5, and 6, except anytime you take the square root of a negative number, you're going to add an I to your answer. Okay, so just like earlier, if I had x squared equaled negative 16, the difference is instead of being plus or minus 4, since x squared can't be a negative number, it would be negative plus or minus negative 4i. Okay, or plus or minus 4i. Because you have the square root of a negative number, which is always has an I because I is the square root of negative 1. Okay, so 17, 18, 19, and 20, you simplify it the same way. You simplify the radicals, but you add an I anytime you have x squared equals a negative number. Okay, I think that's all I will cover because I'm already 18 minutes into the video and I don't want to waste any more of your time doing this because I want to give you plenty of time to work. So hopefully that explains and kind of gives you some more details and some more stuff for your notes so that you can do these. Again, for all of the problems that ask you to solve by finding the square root, all you're doing is it's solving it just like you always have. Get the variable by itself equals a number. The difference is since we're doing quadratics now, it's going to be x squared and you're going to have to take the square root of both sides to get the x by itself. Okay, it's just one additional step that hopefully you'll get better at doing the more practice you do. So again, if you are still having problems, give me specific issues, and I will help you with that as much as I can via email tomorrow. Now, tomorrow I have a little bit going on in the morning. We have another doctor's appointment that I have to go to in the morning. So first hour, I may not be able to answer your emails immediately, but fifth and sixth hour, I don't really have anything going on. I may be in the car line waiting to pick up my boys at the beginning or at the end of sixth hour. But email me if you have any issues, and I will get back to you as soon as possible. Hope this video finds you well. Can't wait to see you guys next week. Appreciate you, and be good for the 7. Thanks, guys.